d4, d5, c4, c6, knight f3, knight f6, knight c3, e6, g3, knight d7, bishop g2, d takes c4, castle kingside, bishop d6, bishop g5, h6, bishop takes f6, queen takes f6, knight d2, knight b6, a4, a5, knight c4, queen e7, b3, c takes b3, knight takes d6, check, queen takes d6, queen takes b3, queen takes d4, rook fd1, castle kingside, rook a b1, knight d5, knight c4, queen c3, e4, queen takes b3, rook takes b3, knight b4, e5, knight d5, f4, b5, a takes b5, c takes b5, bishop takes d5, e takes d5, knight b6, rook a6, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, rook takes b5, a4, rook d takes d5, a3, rook a5, rook c6, rook d8, check, king h7, rook a8, rook takes a8, rook takes a8, rook c1, check, king g2, rook c2, check, king f3, a2, f5, rook takes h2, e6, f takes e6, f takes e6, rook h1, rook takes a2, rook e1, rook a6, king g6, g4, king f6, king g3, rook e3, check, king f2, rook takes e6, g5, check, h takes g5, rook a2, king f5, king f3, g4, check, king g3, rook e3, check, king f2, rook f3, check, king g2, king g5, rook a8, rook b3, Rook A2. King H4. Rook C2. Rook B8. Rook A2. Rook C8. Rook B2. Rook A8. Rook C2. Rook A4. Rook B2. G3. Rook C2. Rook F4. Rook C7. Rook F2 check. King G1. G6. Rook C6. G5. Rook H6 check. King G4. Rook H8. Rook E2. Rook A8. Rook E4. King G2. Rook F4. King G1. Rook F2. Rook A7. Rook E2. Rook A8. G2. Rook A3. King F4. Rook E3. Rook E3. Rook takes E3. King takes E3. King takes G2. King F4. King F2. G4. King G2. G3. King G1. King G4. King G2. King H4. King G1. King H3. King H1. G2 check. King G1. King G3.